A real estate professional's favorite frenemy, Zillow, said, "We're not going to become our own brokerage." And Zillow officially launches Zillow Homes in 2020.
You're listening to the Segovia Show.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I am your host, Segovia. In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about, or weigh in with my thoughts about Zillow Homes. Zillow Homes is basically the next step that was inevitable for Zillow to become its own online brokerage. And I've actually discussed this quite a bit over the years because in my social circle, in my network, I should say, there's a lot of professionals that have a love-hate relationship with Zillow. The situation has been that Zillow is like a bit of a leech, and I know I'm going to be a little strong in this episode against Zillow, but there's a reason why it's called frenemy. Okay, because more people trust the stuff they find on Zillow than they would the actual professionals providing the information to Zillow. See, Zillow and a lot of other iBuyers, these companies that have been trying to change what they consider a cartel in the real estate industry, they've been really adamant about getting the multi-listing service information public because then they can compete. Otherwise, it's illegal for them to compete against MLS, or they can't reach that marketplace, so they can't cast this wide net, which is why it stifled the market for iBuyers. One of the ways to circumvent that has been to basically join the Association of Realtors, whether it's a state level or even the national level, to be able to gain access to these multi-listing services, particularly because each of these can sometimes basically highlight different regions. So with that in mind, Zillow finally says they're going to do just that very thing. Now, let me just find my notes here where they're actually going to be launching Zillow Homes, because they had to get licensed in order to do this, and they are only launching it in a certain few states. I know they're starting in Arizona, to be sure. So yeah, two of them are in Arizona. Starting January 2021, Zillow offers customers in Atlanta, Phoenix, and Tucson will be working directly with a licensed employee of Zillow Homes. The way the actual brokerages work, some might say is a little bit antiquated. I might agree a little bit there, but you have the main broker, the managing broker per se. There could be other associate brokers. It doesn't mean they handle the day-to-day operations. It just means that they are, if they want to, capable of opening their own office and managing that. Some just choose not to. So they'll have a managing broker doing that very thing. But as a broker, that means you've done all the grunt work, the leg work. You passed all the certification, the tests that you need to get all the way up to where you are, because you have to be considerably more knowledgeable and an experienced manager, so to speak, to be a broker. So when you have a licensee or a sales agent license, it's basically a licensee. When they come in, they basically are working for the brokerage. Sometimes people might find that a little misleading. That's why they're asking, are you the broker? And they'll have to say, no, I'm not the broker, so-and-so. So that means that those licensees answer to the brokerage. Same thing's going to apply here. Zillow is going to be the broker, but because they're a corporation and they're basically nationwide, it can't exactly work the same way because each state requires its own license. So in this case, they've been able to get state licenses in Arizona and Georgia. Just that they're going to be trying out in Atlanta, and obviously in the two fastest growing cities in Arizona, which is Phoenix and Tucson, which some say might actually become a mega city where Tucson's going to be swallowed up by Phoenix. If you see what's going on over there, you'll know what I mean. So when you have this in mind, that means that this Zillow offers, which was basically like the transaction side of things, was being handled by Zillow, but the sales side was being handled by either local brokerages or just larger brokers, let's say Remax, Keller Williams, or whatever, in the area that they were dealing with. So customers technically got a little confused. So the argument goes from Zillow as to wait, who am I actually working with? I signed up with Zillow, but I'm being redirected to Remax. Are they Zillow? What's this or that, And then sometimes things get a little slower. There's less control. No, that's what I'll agree. I agree that there is less control when there's a lot more outside parties involved, per se. In my case, I've had several occasions where I had to bring in my lender to swoop in to save the deal, especially in some cases at the 11th hour. So these kind of things can happen. So in my case, I put things together. I have not had a client use our in-house mortgage company, mostly because they believe I'm getting a kickback or whatever, which is illegal. That's not how it works. So, but you can't convince people otherwise from their own prejudices. So when I bring in another company that's not sharing a name with mine, people will feel a little more comfortable knowing that, okay, they're an independent name. I don't see any of your company in the other company. It's an arm's length thing. It's like, yeah, there it is. If there's an established professional relationship there, it's like we're a company. Zillow understands that, hey, the more control we have in-house, the quicker we can close a deal, which is absolutely true. And in the case of real estate, believe me, there are a lot of moving parts. And in the early days of my show, I actually broke down a lot of those moving parts because some people are confused. It can be a daunting task, especially knowing that, oh my gosh, it's the biggest investment in my life. I'm actually going to buy a house. What do I do? What should I know? How do I go about it? And this and that. And there's two schools of thought that I feel happen with realtors. There's one that assumes that these individuals know absolutely nothing and will educate them as much as possible on the process and probably overwhelm them. Like, oh my gosh, that's way too much. I don't want to do this anymore. And then you have the other side that assumes that people know enough because they're online all the time. So maybe they've done some kind of research that these professionals don't explain the process to their clients, and their clients are like shocked when they're in the transaction. They have no idea what to do, what to expect, and they don't like how it's going. I try to bridge the gap. So I try to gauge how much information someone knows about the whole real estate process, and if there's outside influences, not just online, but because, oh, my cousin's a realtor, it's somewhere else, they told me this or that, or so-and-so's an investor and they're telling me this. There's always going to be an outside influence. So I try to gauge that in the initial conversations I have with my clients, just so I know where they're coming from, and ultimately to find out just how much I can dedicate to the process and how much I don't need to, or elaborate where I have to. Those are the kind of things I keep in mind when I have my, I guess you could say, interview process with my clients. The problem I have with Zillow getting involved with all this isn't really much of anything new. There's other big iBuyers, if you could say, that have been trying to do this, like Redfin being one of them. They actually partnered up with Keller Williams, if I'm not mistaken. So they got the backing of an actual giant real estate firm. They're an international firm, so they did it right. Whereas Zillow is basically trying to do something from scratch. The whole experience of trying to keep everything in-house sounds amazing. The problem ultimately lies in how complicated these transactions actually are. If buying a house were as easy as a turnkey thing, it's like, okay, I see the product, I want it. Do I qualify? Yes, you do. Okay, here it is. That's not how it works. Real estate is immensely complicated, not because we wanted it to be complicated. It's just by nature of what is a property and the rights to that property and where it resides, things can get a little muddled. Because I was just having this conversation earlier today with a friend that was asking me, like, what is it? What do you think about buying a lot of land and being able to build on it, to build multiple units? I'm like, I think it's a wonderful idea. Just depending on where you buy it, though. Even though it's private property, there's something called easements, and you got to get like boundaries. If they're not exactly spelled out for you, you might need someone to survey the property to do the boundaries. But then when you have easements, and an easement would be like this. Let's say you can buy the property, but what if there's power lines running through that property? That means the utility company has a right to access your private property so they can do maintenance on that power line. Now, does that mean they can go without permission? Of course, more likely than not, depending on what kind of property it is, they will have to ask for permission, rights to enter your property. But that has to be understood. What about water? There's something called water rights. What if there's private water rights? There is such thing as that, especially in agricultural areas. So there's a lot of different things that can happen. And if you're in a property that's situated away, you might have something called what's Mellow Roos, like here in California. I was like, what is that? Another special assessment tax on said property. So all these different things are counted in. And if there's nobody there to actually explain to somebody what it all entails, and just like every person, you have a complaint. When you call customer service, you don't want to hear a robot. You don't want to hear a call center. You want to speak to the person that was helping you. How all this is going to work out with Zillow Homes, it's yet to be seen because they're launching in January. I love the idea of streamlined stuff. I've always said that real estate has always been on the bleeding edge of technology, but a lot of the agents continue to live in the past with antiquated routines to get tasks done. So we needed to bridge that gap. I think Zillow, in a way, and because of what's happened with the pandemic, has forced realtors to adopt strategies that have been available for the longest time. And also stop the onslaught of Zillow, because if we step up our game, like I've said before, we can show the value in what is having a human component versus all electronic. That's one of the reasons why I'm not all up on Zillow. I'm not exactly all against them either. It was just a matter of time. But one thing that you have to know, and I'm not going to rehash it here, but I will direct you over to an episode I've actually done about this called The iBuyer. Because a lot of people think that, oh yeah, since we're going to go electronic, we're going to have economies of scale that are better and there'll be more savings to the client. Read the fine print, folks. iBuyers are more expensive, and more people have to realize the lie of the iBuyer. There's a lot of things that go into all this. Like I said, I'm not all entirely against Zillow, but I am against what people will believe that is better. They know they're literally feeding off us. Everything they have has been made possible by us, the realtors, who actually have done the legwork. All they're doing is quite literally lobbying and paying their IT engineers to get this system all up and running. And they have power and influence and all this advertising that they circumvent some of the legal hurdles that we have to comply all the time. If we so much as miss one advertising number, any of our advertising, we could have our license suspended. No, it's that crazy. But none of these big companies have to comply with that. I don't think that's fair at all. And I find it very convenient that Zillow isn't doing it here in California. Think about that for a moment. Yeah, that's how hard it is to not only be in the industry, but continuously be in the industry, because we have continuing education. Every 4 years as a broker, I have to renew my license. And I have to do continuous education in said years, where I have to show that I've actually taken all these additional classes to make sure I'm up to date with the latest changes. And whatever requirements the Bureau Department of Real Estate is going to require. And by the way, they're always changing their names, so I use those interchangeably. So just give you an FYI that Zillow Homes, as great as it might sound, is not all it's made out to be. But they're also not the first ones either. And I don't just mean the iBuyers. Redfin was a little bit ahead of the game. I believe it was late last year. I'm losing track of time with all the stuff that's gone on this year, right? So with that, it's like there's been someone else ahead of them. But Zillow is now doing it in with their own mortgage company, with their offers, with transactions, and now with this. And as someone that actually worked with Zillow Premier Agent, I could tell you they offer some really great services for us agents, but I've had 0 leads come in from Zillow. So I'm like, okay, fine. It's okay. It's a competitive marketplace. It's all right. So you just channel your energy where your sellers or your customers are coming from. And if they're not coming from Zillow, I'm not going to be spending any more money on Zillow for it. That's just the way it works. But anyway, that's what I wanted to share in my thoughts. A real estate professional sharing their ideas about a new competitor on the block. Technically, they're not here yet, but they are making a splash in Arizona and in Atlanta. come January 2021. And we'll see how this experiment all pans out. But of course, I admit that it's also the future of things. All right, those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Andre Segovia Show. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, stay to know. You can find out more of my content and resources available at www.theandresegovia.com and segoviaras.com. And the conversation continues there. And I'll see you on the next one.